Excellent. Jana, are we prepared to go?
I believe we are. I'm just going to unmute the board members, so just give me 1 minute. Let's see. Okay, Naseem, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So Naseem, you will, and Jason will not be actually voting. Okay, go ahead.
Stuart, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You're going to have to use your raise your hand.
Okay.
Just so I can see you, sir.
All right.
All right. Well, good evening. Let's call to order this meeting of this regular meeting of the Birmingham Planning Board for Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. If we could please call the roll.
Scott Klein.
Present.
Robin Boyle.
Here.
Stuart Jeffries.
Here.
Bert Kozak.
Here.
Danielle Scher.
Here.
Brian Williams. Janelle Whipple-Boyce.
Here.
Jason Emmerich.
Here.
Naseem Berman.
Here.
Rachel Hester. June Lee.
Excellent. For the record, Rachel Hester did raise her hand. She's just muted right now. So
Thank you.
good to see you. Let's move on to review and approval of the minutes for the regular meeting on June 24th. Are there any comments related to the minutes? Any corrections?
I have one.
Ms. Whipple-Boyce, please.
Page 4, the preliminary site plan approval for 469, 479 South Old Woodward. It says that Mr. Williams proposed that, but I'm pretty sure I did.
For the motion, you mean?
Yeah, the motion. Sorry.
Okay, we'll have to go back and double check the tape, Laura, if you can.
Yep, no problem.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. That will be corrected as appropriate. Any other comments or corrections from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Whipple-Boyce. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kozak, I believe. Any comments from the board? On the motion, seeing none, although we'll do a roll call.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce.
Yes.
Bert Kozak.
Yes.
Danielle Scher.
Yes.
Brian Williams.
Yes.
Robin Boyle.
Absent.
Okay. Scott Klein.
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes. Excellent.
Laura, if I may, could I get you to turn your microphone down a little bit? That's
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Well, just know that you're projecting forcefully.
I will speak very quietly.
I'm pinned against the wall here. This is it. Hey! Ready.
All right. So, chairperson's comments. Welcome. This is another virtual meeting. We have been through this a number of times now, and I believe we've gotten the hang of it. A few things for those who are participating for the first time. As you've just seen, all votes will be roll call votes to ensure that we accurately portray the record. From a board perspective, if you are looking to comment, you can use either the raise your hand function inherent in the system or simply raise your hand. I will be monitoring you. If you are seconding a motion, I would appreciate, as Mr. Kozak just showed a few minutes ago, just raising your hand as well to help me ensure that the record is accurate. From the public perspective, we will be discussing a number of items tonight. At some point during each item, you will have an opportunity to speak as the public. When I open public comments, I will let you know that it is the appropriate time. What I would ask you to do is utilizing the raising your hand function within Zoom, which is located in the command center down at the bottom near the center of the screen. At that time, you click that button, raise your hand, and I will go through and look for comments. And if I call your name, please introduce yourself again for the record and give us your address, and then provide your brief comments, just to make sure that we can all get accurately reflected in the record. With that, Jana, do we have any changes to the agenda that was published?
We do not.
Excellent. So let's move along. The final site plan and design review 545 West Brown Street. This is an oddity for us here at the board in that we don't often review single-family residences, but in this case, it is zoned R8, which puts it under our purview. So with that, I believe, Nick, I think you're going to walk us through this one.
That's correct. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. It's been a while, especially Robin. Nice to see you, Robin. So, as Chairman Klein mentioned, this is a design review, 545 West Brown, just outside of the Shane Park District here in Birmingham. The existing building is a 2-story single-family building. This particular application is proposing a 329 square foot addition above an existing attached garage in this single-family home. Just to reiterate, although this is a single-family use, currently the subject site is located within the R8 zoning district, which is why it's here right now. As I described already, it's a modest addition. The materials are also simple. The roof will be clad in Timberline Ultra HD shingles to match the existing roofing. The project will also involve the installation of 4 new Pella Lifestyle Series wood awning windows. 3 of those windows will be on that new addition, and 1 window will be added to the existing master bedroom to match the addition, kind of bring everything together. Finally, there's going to be some siding, Eastern white cedar shingles, which they also have advised are proposed to match the existing second-story facade. Of course, no signage. There's no lighting proposed as a part of this project. Lastly, I wanted to run through some planning and zoning. I double-checked the heights. This proposal does not exceed the maximum height. And the small issue here that is currently being worked on is the setbacks. Although this is in the R8 zoning district, because it's a single-family residence, it needs to follow the R3 bulk placement height standards. In the R3 standards, a 30-foot setback is required in the rear. So we know that the attached garage is existing, but to expand that nonconformity on the second floor, they're going to need a variance of 16 feet 5 inches. As I mentioned in the report, the applicant has already applied for this variance and is scheduled to go before the BZA in August. The design recommendation, all of the standards in Article 7, Section 7.09 of the zoning ordinance have been met, aside from Article 2, because technically the proposal does not comply fully with the zoning ordinance at this point, which is why they will be seeking a variance. With that, the Planning Division did recommend that the Planning Board approve the design review application for 545 West Brown with the following condition: that the applicant must obtain a variance for the 16-foot addition into the required rear setback. Now, I do have, just so everybody knows, Janine Bryce on this meeting here that I'm able to unmute. And if you have any questions to bounce off of them. But that's it. Chairman Klein, I'll hand the ball to you and let me know if there's any questions.
All right, any questions? Mr. Williams.
Yeah, my question, the proposed windows, in what direction do the windows face? East, west, south?
That's right.
Which, all 3?
Yes, there will be a window on each side of the addition, all 3 sides.
Okay. And the second question is, I didn't see anything in the record, but did we send a notice out to the adjoining property owners, particularly the one to the south?
Yes, we did. And actually, they, I might have been better off including it in this packet, but I saw in the BZA packet, and Ms. Bryce might be able to speak to this more, but they received a letter of support from the homeowners right behind them on Cherry Court.
Okay.
I can't think of the address, but she should be able to speak more about the neighbor opinions, if you will. But notices were sent out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from Nick? For Nick? Seeing none, I see Ms. Bryce. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, I apologize if I'm not. Welcome to the meeting. Is there anything you'd like to add in regard to your petition tonight?
No, other than that we did get a very nice email from our neighbor Kyle regarding the his adjacency on the south side of the property, and he's more than comfortable with the addition we're putting on over the garage.
Okay. Are there any questions of Ms. Bryce from the board? I mean, for the record, just it would appear like the addition on the upper story is not extending as far to the south, I'll call it, as your existing garage, correct? So it's not even going. It's not going as close as the garage is currently to the rest of to your property, to your neighbor's property, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Great. And I would like to thank you for including all of the photos. That is always helpful for us. Any other questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, I will take it to the public. Is there anyone in the public here who wishes to comment on this particular item? Please, if so, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom center of your screen. Looking around, I do not see any hands going up.
Nope, I do not see any either.
All right, so then we will bring it back to the board. Thank you very much. Nick.
Although this is unusual, I might again request that since they're going to be seeking a variance, that if this board does have something to say about the proposal, I think the BZA might like to hear it.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody on the board care to make any comments? Any discussion, Mr. Williams?
You know, when this has come up before, we've never incorporated our thoughts into the resolution. Is there a reason why we don't? I mean, we typically say subject to the approval of the BZA, but we could formally, as part of the resolution.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see any reason one way or the other, I guess, depending on the
I just think
whims of the board.
it makes it clear from a record standpoint.
Sure.
So I'm going to make a motion if that's appropriate.
I see no other hands shooting up, so please, by all means.
So I'll move that the planning board approve the design review application for 545 West Brown with the following condition. 1, the applicant must obtain a variance for the 16-foot addition into the required rear setback, and 2, the planning board recommends approval of the variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Second motion.
A motion by Mr. Williams and a second by Mr. Kozak. Conversation at the board? Mr. Scher.
Okay. Brian, did you say that the planning board recommends approval? Was that part of your motion by the BZA?
Yes.
I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I think it's appropriate for us to express that we're pleased with the design, or we think it would be a good addition to the neighborhood or something like that. But I don't know that we go so far as to consider whether or not there are practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship.
Right.
I guess I would ask
Well, we could say
Takes no issue with, or
no, I just think about, finds the design, what would we say, a valuable addition or a good addition to the neighborhood, something like that.
Compatible with the neighborhood?
Pardon me?
compatible with the neighborhood?
Yeah, I think that's fine. We'll substitute that for number 2.
So that the planning board finds the design compatible with the neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kozak, do you find that appropriate?
Yes.
Excellent. Good point, Mr. Scher. Thank you. Any other conversations on the motion? Seeing none, let us go to the public one last time with regard to the motion. Does anybody have any comments related to the motion from the public? I do not see any, so we will bring it back, and if we could please call the roll.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Bert Kozak,
Yes.
Daniel Scher,
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce,
Yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion is unanimous. Thank you very much. Let's move along. There we are. Item E2, 34745 Woodward Avenue, Jack's Car Wash. Jan, I believe this one is you.
Yes, it is, and I believe Mr. Williams has his hand up, though.
Yeah, Mr. Williams.
You know, I think we're going to get into some of the points that have been raised by subsequent correspondence. So since we're going to be talking about these things, I'd like to make a motion before we get started that we formally accept for filing the following documents, which I don't think were part of the record that was the city's records last Friday. One is a letter from Fleece and Vandenbrink dated July 8, 2020 to Jana Ecker from Julie Kroll. The second document is a letter dated July 8, 2020 from Tim Courier of Buyer Howlett. And the third is a memorandum containing engineering comments also dated July 8, 2020 from Austin Fletcher of the city of Birmingham. So my motion is to accept and file those three documents.
Motion, Mr. Williams. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Scher. He gets his hand up first. Any conversation on the motion?
I would simply ask whether the applicant has received all three of these items.
The applicant has not received all three of these items. I'm happy to read them into the record if you would like.
Well, I think we ought to vote on the motion and then make sure the applicant has a chance to react to them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we vote on the motion, and then Jana, as part of your report, whether you actually read them or whether you just make sure that the applicant is aware of the conversation, then I think that's appropriate. Could we call the roll on the motion, please?
Brian Williams.
Yes.
Daniel Scher.
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce.
Yes.
Robin Boyle.
Yes.
Scott Klein.
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Bert Kosak.
Yes.
Excellent. So, Jana, as you start into your report, perhaps using your judgment to decide when and how to incorporate comments received from those various parties, please.
Okay. For the applicant that's listening, the two letters, one from Buyer Howlett and one from Fleece and Vandenbrink, they are with regards to the use of the right-of-way in the MDOT right-of-way along Woodward Avenue. But I will go through the report. So as you know, the applicant has come forward with this. This is for the Jack's Car Wash site at 34745 Woodward. It's about 0.6 of an acre site. It's currently there. They're proposing to redo the circulation pattern on the site. I'm just going to pull up, I can, bear with me for a second. Okay. This is the proposed site plan for the Jack's Car Wash. As you recall, they came to us before a couple of times in 2019. The last time was in October of 2019, and at that time, the planning board actually voted to deny the proposed changes to the site, primarily because of the circulation pattern. Can you see my cursor here? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. As you come out of the car wash, if you recall, they're proposing that the vehicles turn around in this right-of-way area here that's owned by Michigan Department of Transportation, come into this area, which is where the detailing and the vacuuming is proposed. Currently, it takes place in the back. So they're proposing to change their circulation pattern. You come in off Brown, come around, there's 3 lanes. You enter into the car wash. If you wish to get your car detailed and vacuumed as well, you pull out here and into this area. It has room for 6 cars to be detailed at the same time. Some of the concerns, or one of the main concerns at that time, was that the applicant had not met with MDOT or engineering or the city attorney to discuss the use of this right-of-way. The planning board your comments were, one, it's counterflow to traffic because, of course, Woodward traffic is going southbound on this side. These cars would come out and turn northbound, go into this right-of-way area where it's very unclear where the sidewalk is, where the because it's all paved. So there was a conflict there with pedestrians, and then curving around here. At that time, the planning board had voted to deny it as the plan did not meet all the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and primarily the issue was screening along Brown Street, safety concerns and traffic hazard concerns with this circulation in a counterflow direction in the Woodward right-of-way. And lastly, that the applicant had not got anything in writing from MDOT stating that they would be entitled to use this portion of the right-of-way for their private use. Since then, of course, the applicant has amended their plans, and those are the ones you see tonight. The circulation pattern has not changed. It still remains coming out of the car wash, going into counterflow to traffic direction, coming in here. They have agreed to put some planters across this area here so that people can't get out at this location unless they need to, and then they can move the planters. They have enhanced the screening along the Brown Street side. They've also provided a sidewalk along the Brown Street side. They indicate that it's 5 feet in width. However, it's one of the engineering department's comments are concerned with the fact they don't know that there's a full 5 feet there. So that's something we'd have to address. They have added street trees along Brown with tree grates, and part of the 5-foot walking path is noted to include the ADA compliant tree grates. The issues, they did not meet with the engineering department. They did not meet with the city attorney, but you saw in the packet there was a letter from their attorney, Mr. Scobell, and that indicated his review of the law that would allow them to use that right-of-way area. So I do have a letter in response to that from Mr. Courier. And I'm going to read that into the record just so that everybody's clear on that. Dear Ms. Ecker, and this was literally received about 6 o'clock tonight, so I apologize to the applicant for not getting this to you. I have reviewed the June 25th, 2020 memorandum from Bradley Scobell regarding Jack's Car Wash and the right-of-way easement and his analysis of the rights and liabilities. My concerns with respect to this proposal fall into 2 categories. 1, we have had no official communication from MDOT as to whether this is permissible. And 2, even if this is permissible under MDOT's legal review, is it operationally safe to allow such an operation to occur? With respect to the first concern, I believe it is important that we receive some written communication from MDOT as to whether they will give permission for the use of the right-of-way in the manner as described in the memorandum prepared by Mr. Scobell. This is MDOT's property, not ours. MDOT should be making the determination as to the rights of access and usage. If MDOT would permit this usage, the second concern must be looked at by the planning board as to whether both uses within our ordinances are a safe usage of the property in light of all the remaining rights of the public. In this regard, I want to refer you to a letter from Fleece and Vandenbrink dated July 8th, 2020. Actually, I'm sorry, there's a typo in, and they refer to a July 7th letter, but it was actually dated July 8th, expressing some concerns and request for additional information in order to look at this matter further. At the present time, as the city's traffic consultants, Fleece and Vandenbrink agree with MDOT in the continued use of the sidewalk in this area to facilitate vehicle movements is not recommended. That was a comment that was provided in an email that the applicant submitted from an MDOT representative. So we do have a Fleece and Vandenbrink letter that was also submitted today, and if you'd like, I can read that for you. Probably best if I just...
Please, I think you should. Please.
Yeah, so that it's in the record. Now, what happened was when we received the letter from the applicant's legal representative, we went through the process here of requesting a legal opinion in response, and we were directed to get a traffic consultant's feedback on it as well. prior to obtaining the legal opinion from the city attorney. So that's kind of how this all works. So we got the Fleece and Vandenbrink letter with regards to traffic and circulation and safety concerns, and then Mr. Courier's as the city attorney. The letter from Fleece and Vandenbrink is dated today as well. Dear Ms. Ecker, Fleece and Vandenbrink staff have completed our review of the proposed Jack's Car Wash at 34745 Woodward Avenue. The updated site plan is dated June 4th and was received by Fleece and Vandenbrink on July 1st. Based on our review, we have the following comments. The proposed queuing area has been revised from the existing operations to an automated system with 3 separate lanes, 1 cash and detail only. And these 3 lanes that they're talking about are when you come in here and it breaks into 3 lanes before you enter the car wash. 2, the fast lane, and 3, unlimited club. An analysis is recommended to determine the recommended vehicle queue length required for the site based on the proposed operations and the maximum service rate of the car wash. Based on the results of this analysis, the site layout and circulation plan should be reviewed and revised as necessary. 2, the MDOT Oakland TSC indicated in their review of this site access via email on October 8th of 2019 that they did not have concerns about the counterflow site access onto Woodward Avenue. However, MDOT did note that there is a concern with the site utilizing the sidewalk adjacent to Woodward Avenue. We agree with MDOT and the continued use of the sidewalk in this area to facilitate vehicle movements is not recommended. In addition, the proposed vehicle queuing for the vacuum area has the potential to further block the sidewalk during peak times, presenting an additional concern regarding ADA accessibility adjacent to the site. As shown in the Google Street View from June 19th and August 2018, the sidewalk is currently utilized for vehicle queuing, even without the proposed vacuum stations being moved to the south side of Brown. Summary, the applicant should provide ingress queuing calculations for the site based on the maximum service rate for the proposed operations. The site layout should be revised as necessary to accommodate the projected vehicle queuing calculated for the proposed operations. Second bullet point under the summary is the egress movement of vehicles should be designed to reduce pedestrian vehicle conflicts, including the use of the sidewalk to facilitate vehicle queuing. We hope that this report addresses the city's needs regarding this project. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at your convenience, and is signed by Julie Kroll, traffic engineer. And Ms. Kroll is on the call in the Zoom meeting today if anybody has any questions for her.
Mr. Williams, you have a question?
Yeah, there's a reference in the Courier letter that the city had not received a written communication from MDOT, but the Julie Kroll letter indicates that there was an email, a copy of which we don't have, that they did not have concerns about the counterflow. That's point number 1. So I don't know where that email is, or whether it's available, or whether we can review it, but the concern raised by Mr. Courier, I think, is addressed in paragraph 2 by Fleece and Vandenbrink, at least that portion of the Courier letter. The second point, and I should have mentioned this the last time this was here, but this counterflow issue, their existing practice for decades, and I mean decades, has been to utilize counterflow. The city is aware of it. MDOT is aware of it. I'm aware of it because my car has been counterflowing on frequent occasions. So if MDOT doesn't have any concern and there's an email, I think we shouldn't focus so much on that. I do agree with the pedestrian and the sidewalk, but I think we need to tie down this counterflow issue because Mr. Courier is making a big deal of it.
Well, if I may, we do have an email. It was in previous packets. I believe it was in this one. The email from MDOT said basically, well, we don't necessarily have any issues with it as long as the city indemnifies them for any issues that occur in the right of way. And Mr. Courier's concern with that is he wants a letter from MDOT that says that they accept and approve of the use of this and that the city does not have any liability with regards to this use.
All right, so that's really the disagreement.
Right. And the city is obviously...
Not whether there's counterflow. Well, what's the city's current position? We know that they're doing counterflow right now.
We do, and the concern is, of course, that if the planning board decides to approve the site plan, that therefore are we approving something that is safe from a traffic standpoint, from vehicles and pedestrians, and is it causing a traffic safety issue, or is it making it worse from what's there? I don't know when it exactly started, so I can't say as to whether they obtained approval from MDOT way back when. But right now, what happens is the cars come out of the car wash, hang a right, and go into the detailing area for the vacuuming.
No, I don't think so.
They do several different things, Jana, if I can just interject briefly. There are several ways that the cars that are simply being dried exit the facility. There is an opportunity for cars to exit and do a hard right and bring them back into that mingling area behind the building. But there's also the option to go against the flow, as you've said, and turn left into an area that is also used, particularly on busy days, for further drying and I think for some detailing, to be dead honest.
But I think, Robin, the point is that the Jack's personnel are driving those cars. At least they have until recently. I haven't gone there since COVID hit. But if you're in a self-drive situation, you don't leave your vehicle. Jana's correct. You go right, but you go out and they dry the car and you leave. Yeah. You go right if you're going to get your car detailed. And sometimes if the two exit points directly to the east are full, the Jack's personnel will swing the car to the left.
Yeah.
And go counterflow.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. Mr. Williams, to be fair though, and I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. I want to let Jana finish. It has been reported to this board on multiple occasions by the applicant that Jack's personnel is not going to be driving vehicles to the detail area in the front of the building. So we can ask them. I don't care what they're doing now. The fact that they're doing it now doesn't make up for the fact that it's stupid. And I'll put that on the record with a capital S. You know, the fact that it's been done for 40 years doesn't make it right. But secondly, they're adding 6 detail stations to the front as opposed to an occasional vehicle that is being pulled over and drive. So I agree. Let's be fair to the conversation here, and perhaps maybe we should let Jana finish up any report that she has. Maybe even read in, Assistant Engineer Fletcher's letter just for the record, and then finish up any report so that we can then come back and discuss and to, in fairness, the applicant, get them involved, because right now we're talking about them, but we need to make sure that they're involved in this conversation to answer any questions we may have. So Jana, if you could, please.
Okay, so I will continue with the report. I'll put the plan back up on the screen. Again, what's changed since the last time they were here before the board is they have provided a rough, well, I don't want to say rough, but it's not a very detailed floor plan, but they do have it. Obviously, it's mainly a car wash within the building. They've also provided an updated landscape plan. I will state that there are inconsistencies between the plans, both with regards to the property line location and also the landscaping from one sheet to another. Essentially, they're keeping this landscaped area here, which you saw last time. They have one on the corner. They've increased the one on the corner in size a little bit. The dimensions here, they've added this screening, this row of junipers along Brown Street. What they have now, they have 17 juniper shrubs proposed at a height of 6 feet to assist in screening the proposed vehicle vacuuming and detailing area on the north side of the building. So that's different. The issue came up before, if you recall, that not only was this considered a parking area, but it was also mechanical equipment with regards to the detailing and the vacuums. If you recall, there were columns that went over to provide suction services, I guess, for vacuums to each of these units, etc. And I can put them back up again if you'd like me to. We went through a lot of this previously. So they need to screen it. The ordinance requires that they screen all of that from the street. And of course, they front on Brown Street and on Woodward Avenue. So they're required to screen all of this mechanical equipment and this parking, as well as the parking down here. There was a comment made the last time they were here that there was no screening along Woodward Avenue. That has not changed. Now, to be fair, most of this is an exit point, but technically there should be a screen wall in this area here or some plantings. They have not added anything there. They have changed, well, they've provided the details on the plantings that are proposed, for one. Right now, this island here is varying in width from 7 to 12 feet, and it extends approximately 26 feet to the south as you kind of come down here. One of the comments was that if you're to screen this entire area, it should actually come down further. Of course, this is tied in with their issue of wanting to circulate the cars in this MDOT right-of-way, because if the landscape island came down further, then it would cut down on their ability to maneuver vehicles around this curve. The other issue in this area here is because it is paved, you've got an area that's concrete, that's up on the curb level, and the sidewalk, and it's really unclear where the pedestrians are supposed to walk. And as Ms. Kroll mentioned in her letter, there's definitely vehicular pedestrian conflicts throughout this entire zone, because it's cars are pulling out of the car wash. It's not clear where the sidewalk is. It's not clear to watch out for them necessarily. And then as you come around here, if you've got cars turning into this lane and cars turning into this lane, they're coming across the pedestrian sidewalk as well, causing some conflict situations. Let's see. So they're now proposing in this area 4 juniper shrubs. The city engineer previously had some concerns about the size of the trees that were required or proposed there. They've changed that to the 4 juniper shrubs and then some grow-low sumac and dwarf barberry bushes. So most of that is lower. With regards to the streetscape along Brown Street, they are adding that full sidewalk. Before, it wasn't the full 5 feet. As I've indicated, it appears that it's 5 feet on the plans, but we do have a comment from the engineering department that questions whether that is actually correct, given how tight it is in there. It's also hard to determine where the property line is, because on some of the sheets, it shows the property line, the sidewalk actually coming in a couple of feet on the property line, and then on other sheets, it shows the property line for the site actually coming into Brown Street a little bit. So we would definitely need to have all of those plans made consistent and correct, so we know exactly where that is. If the sidewalk is on private property, which I do believe it is, and at least a portion of it, they would be required to provide a public access easement to the city to allow the public sidewalk to be placed partially on their property. They were also asked last time to provide the exposed aggregate between the 5-foot pedestrian path and the curb, along with the street trees and the tree grates, because it is very tight. And the broom finish concrete for the sidewalk. These are all streetscape standards that are required for downtown. They have done that at this time. They've added exposed aggregate in the area of the trees to the curb, and they've done the broom finish concrete for the walking path. Some other issues with regards to the sidewalk, there's actually an obstruction because there's a Cobra head light fixture that's right dab smack here in the middle of the sidewalk. So while there is a 5-foot sidewalk potentially provided along here, that pole falls right in the middle. Now that's an existing Cobra head pole that's already there, obviously to light this intersection, but that would be an obstruction and a dangerous one at that for the pedestrian way along here. They did go to the city arborist and obtained a waiver for providing the street trees that they would be required to provide along Woodward Avenue. Other properties along Woodward have been able to get that with the space constraints that are there. So again, the circulation's coming in here through the car wash out here. They're adding parking spaces along here. Primarily now they use this area north of the building for parking, and as I said, they do a lot of their detail and vacuum work in the back. So that would move the parking back here. One of the comments from the building department that was received today also indicated that this ADA space here would have to be increased in size a little bit. It's not quite large enough to meet the building code requirements for ADA spaces. Again, there's the MDOT right-of-way issue, which is really one of the biggest issues here. Comments that were received from departments, the police department did not have any concerns. The fire department did not have any concerns. The building department, their only concern was the sizing of the ADA space. And the engineering department did provide their comments also this evening, so I'm happy to read those for you if you like. The 5 comments are as follows. Well, actually, I'll start with the introduction. The engineering department has reviewed the revised site plan dated June 4th, 2020. The following comments are provided at this time. 1, there are numerous inconsistencies between the plan sheets in regard to property lines, types, and numbers of plantings, etc. Also, depending on the actual location of the property line along Brown Street, a public access easement for the sidewalk may be required, as some plan sheets appear to indicate the sidewalk will be on private property. 2, we have concerns with the proposed traffic patterns for this project, i.e. traffic flowing opposite direction of Woodward Avenue in the right-of-way, vehicle stacking extending across a public sidewalk, etc. Also, see Fleece and Vandenbrink Engineering's letter dated July 8th, 2020. 3, the plan has proposed the installation of 5 new trees in the narrow Brown Street right-of-way in front of the site. There have never been city trees in this area due to the lack of public right-of-way. The proposal as shown is physically impossible to construct and will not receive a permit from the engineering department as shown. Note that when the city's standard tree grates are installed, an additional 6 inches minimum of concrete must be installed between the street curb and the tree grate in order to provide concrete in which steel anchors that support the tree grate can be poured. Therefore, the center of the new tree would be 2.5 feet south of the back of curb, and it is surrounded by a 12-inch open circle in the tree grate for future tree growth. Even if the design uses the metal tree grate as part of the walking surface, the city sidewalk would only be 4.7 feet wide, which is in violation of city policy. In order to introduce city trees in this area, the applicant should consider providing an easement to the city for sidewalk purposes, thereby allowing reconstruction of the sidewalk in such a way that there is sufficient room both for pedestrians and trees. Another option, since there is no parking on this section of Brown Street, would be to remove 2.5 foot wide sections of concrete immediately behind the curb to provide room for perennial plants and mulch. 4, while not in conflict with the city code, the engineering department also does not recommend the installation of evergreen trees on private property to the west of the new Brown Street exit driveway. That's this area here. Assuming the driveway will be used frequently during business hours, the trees will serve as a sight distance conflict between the drivers using this exit, as the trees will obscure the view of both pedestrians and bicyclists that may be using the adjacent city sidewalk. Lower growing plants would be more appropriate. So those were the comments that were received. So I think we do what our recommendation would be. Well, sorry, let me get back to signage. There's a lot of signage that has appeared to stay the same as from last time. They're proposing to remove the pole sign that's in this right-of-way area here. They're proposing to add a building sign on this face of the building, also on this face of the building, as well as numerous directional signs and so on throughout the property. They've stated that none of that is changing, although it did appear that one of those light box signs was changing slightly in size, and that was placed on a wall, so it was a wall mount sign. So we would want to get some clarification from the applicant as to whether they did in fact mean for that to change, or if that was an inconsistency. So overall, there seem to be some outstanding issues still that I think we would want to see the applicant address. Therefore, the Planning Division is recommending that the Planning Board postpone the final site plan and design review for Jack's Car Wash, pending receipt of revised plans that include the following: full screening of the parking area and mechanical equipment in the vacuum detailing area along Brown Street and Woodward, and the parking area along Woodward in accordance with section 4.54 of the zoning ordinance, or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. 2, a clearly distinguished 5-foot wide minimum pedestrian sidewalk along the entire Woodward and Brown Street frontages must be shown through material changes, landscape definition, or other means. And that would be the 5-foot width, and that would be unobstructed. 3, all signage details for the building, canopy, and kiosk signage to demonstrate compliance with all requirements of the sign ordinance or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. 4, the applicant submit material samples to complete the design review. 5, the applicant comply with the requests of all city departments, primarily the engineering department and the building department, as I read those comments. And 6, the applicant obtain approval of MDOT in writing granting permission for the use of the right-of-way along Woodward, as well as approval of the city commission for the use and indemnification of MDOT against liability for the proposed use of the MDOT right-of-way, should that be a formal condition of formal approval by MDOT.
Thank you, Jana. To the board, are there any questions of Jana on this report? Mr. Scher.
Yeah, Jana, a couple of things. First, do we know exactly where the property line for Jack's is on the east?
On the east side along Woodward?
Yes.
I believe we do, because that didn't seem to be as inconsistently shown on the plans as the others.
And where exactly is that?
Bear with me a minute so I can pull up a plan and zoom in a bit here, and let's see. Go away. I don't think the property line is shown on this plan. All right. So on this plan, it appears that the property line is shown in this area here, which you can see the sidewalk along Brown is partially on their property. And then it appears that it is shown right at the back edge of the sidewalk along Woodward.
Okay, and do we know, so if we take that back edge of the sidewalk and we go to the east, is MDOT the fee owner of that property, or does somebody else own it?
The sidewalk and this area between the sidewalk and the curb? Yes, MDOT is the fee owner.
Okay, so if MDOT's the fee owner, then I have serious questions about the accuracy of Mr. Scoble's memo, because as I remember it, it addresses a right-of-way that goes over a private property owner's property. So in the classic situation, if you own land on what's called a section line road, the state by statute has taken, I forget whether it's 32 feet, I think it's 32 feet on each side of the center line of the section line for roadway purposes. That's a different situation than the situation that you've described, where the so-called MDOT right-of-way is actually, it's not a right-of-way in the sense that MDOT has the right to go over their property, but rather if MDOT owns it, they're the property owner. So I think that's an item if we really get deep into this, we need to sort out and ask the city attorney to look into, because it bears on some of Mr. Scoble's points. It then leads to the next question, which is, did MDOT get noticed as an adjacent property owner for this hearing?
That is a good question. I would have to go back and check the notice records. My guess is they did not get notice as an adjacent property owner. And it is my understanding, because there's no address assigned, and our system pulls addresses for properties located within 300 feet. So to be fair, we don't send a notice to ourselves for, say, Brown Street. The city owns the Brown Street public right-of-way. So I don't think that they did, although they definitely did get notice of it through the applicant with regards to their email response. And then my understanding as to the ownership has always been that MDOT owns that street, Woodward.
Well, if MDOT owns the street, and I guess this is just my final point about it, if MDOT owns the street, and and part or all of the area that the counterflow is proposed to go into, as well as this kind of curvilinear planting area, then I think that, Mr. Courier's point, and I would think the applicant would want as well, to have a formal, legal easement documentation that would allow, for clarity of who has what rights. And I'm not sure, frankly, about our capacity to approve a site plan from an applicant that's putting something on somebody else's real estate without an indication that somebody else has granted approval.
And that's Mr. Courier's point. He would want to see approval granted formally in writing. Also, for the landscape area, they would have to get a permit from MDOT for any work in the right-of-way, and that would include plantings.
Mr. Kozik.
Anna, can you scroll up? There's, so the Balmoral building is, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old or something. So that site was totally redeveloped, and it looks like there's a sort of a mirror image, existing landscaping to remain. So I don't know if it's actually in place as depicted in this drawing, but, there are others that have made improvements in the MDOT right away. How that got accomplished and whatever, I don't know. So I guess my point is that, others have created landscaping and curbs and other sorts of things in that zone.
That's correct. And they are required to get a permit from MDOT. And generally speaking, MDOT approves the permit. And every once in a while we get called if MDOT's having a problem with the approval process, or not a problem, but if they're concerned with the particular improvements. And then sometimes we get called in and we get in with the applicant and MDOT in the city and we work it out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Jana from board members at this moment? Seeing no hands, is the applicant here in order to provide any additional information related to the application?
The applicant is, if you just give me a minute to get everybody added in. Mr. Milan, you are in. I'm going to put Mr. Scobell in as well. He is the one who sent in the letter.
And there is also, Jana, there's, Brian actually left. The architect was in here, but he's gone.
He's gone.
Brian, I see him. Brian Lawson. He's the bright light.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I will bring him in as well.
Hi, Jana. Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Milan, would you please introduce yourself briefly and then please take the floor?
I sure will. Thank you. Thanks for hearing me again. I'm Jason Milan, third generation of Jack's Car Wash. We are trying to improve the traffic flow of our location, trying to keep cars off of Brown Street so they're not getting backed up in line. One of the comments that was made earlier was that about stacking. This will double our existing stacking and will speed up the throughput to get cars into the tunnel. This plan will also get our people out of driving cars, keep the customer in their own car with which they are familiar, and making it safer. The accidents that happen are typically accidents that where our people are in the car and they're not familiar with all the idiosyncrasies of the cars that are out there today. We've done extensive studies on how this is going to work. We've physically laid this out with cars to make sure that it would work, and it does. Like Brian said, we have been turning against the Woodward traffic for many, many years, probably longer than most of us have been alive. We came in today believing we addressed most of the concerns. So a lot of these new reports from the engineers are new concerns that we have not heard yet. which we're happy to address. Landscaping, we're happy to address it and modify any of the landscaping that comes up. That is not a sticking point for us. We can put different, taller trees, shorter trees, whatever, as long as it's not going to block our customers getting out. But we did add all that screening, as Jana adequately described, to block all of that going on the north side of the property. I have with me here our attorney and our architect and our manager, Greg Roselli. I don't know if he's still there. Yeah, he's still there. So I'm here for any questions that anybody has. Happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mylan. Does anyone on the board, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, my question is, what percentage of cars that go through the wash don't have interior cleaning or wouldn't be turning left counterflow but would exit right? What's the percentage of vehicles right now that don't have interior, that are exterior only?
Currently, it's 65%, Brian.
65%, and is this a trend that is increasing?
It's increasing to the exterior side.
Yes.
Yes, more customers are going exterior only due to, everyone's most valuable commodity is time, right? So they want to get in and out as quickly as possible, and that's our goal. So that number, and this location of Birmingham is our highest percentage of interior cleaning. So once we implement this, we expect that percentage to actually drop, and we'll wash more exterior cars more quickly. Because all of our other locations are a higher percentage of exterior than Birmingham.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the applicant from the board? Mr. Kozik.
I think I may have asked this before. Have you looked at, well, let me preface this by saying you've heard our concerns, and there's a whole bunch of them, everything from safety and traffic flow and where's the property line, and can a tree grow there? These are, having been on the board here for a long time and the Board of Zoning Appeals before that, this is a long list of items and issues, and so part of me says, God, this is so. It's and I hope I'm not offending you, but it's not pretty now. And if this was just a vacant piece of land and was to be developed, it could never be developed as proposed here. You'd be obligated to build to the property line, and much like your neighbor has invested substantially to the north and actually to the south. So have you looked at alternatives to make this more in compliance with the requirements or the spirit and intent of our zoning ordinance? Have you explored other things? Can this be interior space? Can you does the length, you called it the tunnel, does it have to be, can you make the turn before you're into the MDOT? Obviously those things are a lot more expensive than buying arborvitae shrubs and some street trees and things like that. But, we there's probably a reason why you get the most detailed cars in the city of Birmingham, because it's a great place. And so, what are you doing here to mitigate these things? It's a substantial investment. You're not going to do this every 3 years or 5 years, I presume. Whatever may or may not get approved here is something that we're all going to see for many, many years to come. So, again, my basic question is, have you looked at other ways to do this, to make all these problems go away that everybody seems to be concerned about?
All right. Thank you, Bert. Yes. We have looked at every possible scenario. You mentioned turning out of the building sooner. Could it be done? Yes, but then we don't have as many spaces to do the vacuuming and interior cleaning. Because that car, if you're looking at the site plan, that car on the southeast would no longer be able to be there.
Understood.
We wouldn't be able to get the cars lined up properly. So unfortunately, that plan didn't pan out. Look, thanks, Jenna. Is this perfect? Absolutely not. Is it better than what we have now? Without a doubt, leaps and bounds better. And I agree with you. The place does not look pretty. We haven't been able to do anything to it since 1956 when my grandfather built it. And we want to. It's not really about the money. Yes, we're not going to go out and waste money, but if we can do anything to make this place look more attractive and more into, how the rest of the city looks, we're happy to do it. We know we're going to get that money back out of it by beautifying the whole property. Not a problem. It's about the flow, how quickly we can process cars, and how safely we can do it. What other questions did you ask that I didn't answer?
Well, no, I think you answered. And you can't shut the place down for 12 months while, you build a new building, I presume, and place it on the site so it might function better. And right, you got to stay in business. That's part of your challenge.
Right.
Anything else, Mr. Kozik?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
We'll go to Mr. Jeffries. I see your hand is up.
Yeah, well, Bert kind of asked the question that I was, yeah, just, I guess if you were able to turn, and I'm an unlimited member, I go through that a lot, and I've been thinking about this since it first came up. Every time I go through there, if you were able to turn, keep the turn on your property, and you lose one car, but you make it infinitely safer. Because I'll drop my wife's car off at the Audi dealer across the street, and I'll walk down that sidewalk. And I tell you, it's a little bit of Frogger when you walk in front of Jack's on the public sidewalk. And if we could keep one stream of those cars off, and maybe you lose one vacuum station, to me, that's a win-win.
Well, yes, sir. Thank you. And we appreciate your business as well. If we went down to 5 spaces, and yes, we could do it, we're not going to be as efficient. It's going to take longer to process cars. And with our current rate, our current demand of full service, we really need 6 to keep up with that demand. And then turning left out of that spot there, on the north side of the building before the sidewalk, we would not be able to get the cars lined up on the north side of the property. There'd be one of those 3-point turns, which is more dangerous than having a nice, wide, clean turn. We don't want to ever have a situation where we're backing cars up. That's the most dangerous of all. Another point I thought of when Jenna was making her remarks on the sidewalk, I don't know if it's allowed, but maybe we could repave the sidewalk with a different color concrete or paver bricks or something to identify the space, if that would alleviate some of those concerns.
Cher, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Mylan, is Ms. Ecker right? Is your eastern property line on the west side of that sidewalk along Woodward?
I'm sorry, Dan, did you ask if that was correct, that's the property line? I cannot answer that with certainty. Brian, do you know for sure? Brian is the architect. Do you know for sure if that's the property line on that?
The property line on the proposed plan is correct. The property line is to the west of that sidewalk on the east side of the property.
All right, thank you. And then my follow-up question is, do you currently hold any kind of permit from MDOT for activities in their right of way?
No, sir. As was mentioned earlier, we did have a phone conversation with them. Brad, I don't know, was that you? I thought it was one of our attorneys that had a phone conversation with them.
I spoke with MDOT. They had.
Excuse me, Mr. Scoble, could you do me a favor, please, and just introduce yourself just so the record is clear?
Oh.
I apologize for interrupting, but I want to make sure your comments are appropriately recorded.
Not a problem. Good evening, Bradley Scoble of Seaburn Kahn. I'm an attorney. I represent Jack's Car Wash. I was the drafter of the wonderful memorandum that we have talked about. And I will say this, some new information has come to light, which I will look into. The memorandum I drafted, I believe, is very clear that the portion of our property that's encumbered by the right-of-way is not under the jurisdiction or the authority of MDOT. They can prevent you from building on it. They cannot tell you how you use it, which way you go. It's the same way at your home. Your driveway goes onto a public street. It is bound by a right-of-way. MDOT or the city can't come in and say, you can't play catch there. You can't walk the wrong way on it because there is no wrong way. However, one thing that came up that Mr. Scher brought up, which I think is extremely astute, is normally with right-of-ways, the property owner owns actually still to the center line of the road, but it is encumbered by this right-of-way that is used for roadway purposes. There is a difference. My memorandum was drafted under the assumption that this was our property that was encumbered by a right-of-way. If MDOT is truly the fee owner of the property, it does change the analysis. It may have been what Tim Courier's opinion was based on, although these documents came in very quickly or very early prior to this meeting. We have not had the chance to review them. Jana did read them into the record. As I see, Mr. Courier's letter didn't seem to suggest any type of legal research, whether it's trying to either contest the legal research that we had put in or coming up with his own. I'm not sure under what basis he wrote his, whether his assumption is the fee owned by MDOT or not. One thing that did come out is you are correct in that the plantings that have been required or requested by the city of Detroit for the screening, or I'm sorry, by the city of Birmingham for the screening, if those are approved, then yes, you will need, or we will need to obtain a MDOT permit to construct in the right-of-way. They do have authority there to make sure that you can't do something that would theoretically stop them from using the right-of-way. If, Woodward was ever expanded, they have the right to utilize that right-of-way, so they certainly wouldn't allow any permanent structures. Landscaping, MDOT routinely approves. I did originally, when this came up, talk to MDOT and talk to their building and safety engineering. They looked at them. I sent them the plans. They didn't have any issue with utilizing it the way we had anticipated. I think that's the exact same result that the traffic consultant came up with, if I remember her report correctly as well. She also spoke with MDOT. They did have some mention regarding liability, and that is where I start to have issues, where you have people talking about liability that are not attorneys, who have not researched it. There is no liability, as far as I can tell, and from what I've documented in my memorandum, on either MDOT or the city of Birmingham with regard to this. Not only is there governmental immunity, but, and bear with me for a second, if my legal position is correct and MDOT does not have the authority to stop us from using the portion of our property that's not used for roadway purposes, if they don't have the authority to stop us, that may sound argumentative, but it's not, because that actually helps with the liability argument. Not only are we relying on governmental immunity through the Governmental Liability Act, but in that case, being that they didn't have authority to regulate us, they can't be held liable for it either. So the point why that was gone through and why I did it, I won't say extensively, but I did it in detail in the memorandum, was to show that liability should not be a concern here by either the city or MDOT. But I do think that Mr. Scher's point is well taken, and I will look into it and find out, because the analysis may change. If MDOT is truly the fee owner of that, then there is a different analysis. The memorandum I put together is based on the fact that we are the fee owner subject to MDOT's right of way.
So I have one more question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, please.
Mr. Mylan, I understand that, you probably weren't even, you may not have been around in 1957. You look like a young guy. But as far as you know, in the however many years that adds up to, has MDOT ever asserted or said to Jack's Car Wash, stop doing what you're doing in our right-of-way?
As far as I know, not at all. Greg Roselli is on the call too. Jana, if you're able to just unmute him for a quick second. Greg, you've been managing that place for quite a few years now. Have you ever had any contact by MDOT? I mean, if you did, I imagine it would have come back to me.
No, I have never had any conversations with any representatives of MDOT.
Thank you.
Could you serve, was that Mr. Roselli?
It was Greg Roselli, location manager.
Okay, thank you. Just for the record, I know these are awkward times. We're trying to make sure everything is clear for everyone.
Good.
Any other, Ms. Wicklebless, please.
Yes. Mr. Mylan, just a couple of quick questions. Currently, if the interior of your car is detailed, a Jack's employee drives that through. That's the current scenario?
Currently?
Yeah.
Yes. That is the current scenario now, yes.
Okay, and the future scenario is if the interior is to be detailed, you will drive your own car through.
Correct. Everybody will drive their own car through, and whether you're getting the interior done, that'll bring you to the left, to the north, and if you're not, that'll bring you straight onto Woodward. So
when you go to do the interior, if you're choosing to do the interior, do you then vacuum that yourself, or does a Jack's attendant come out and help you with that?
So you apparently have been to other Jack's locations where we have the free vacuums. Unfortunately, we do not have the space in Birmingham to put those in. So it would only be done by us. So those 6 spaces on the north, Janelle, would be only vacuumed by us. Okay.
So those are the questions that are leading to my big question then.
Okay.
You said earlier on in this presentation that 35% of your customers currently get their interiors detailed, and you anticipate that number decreasing in the future with this new arrangement, and that you'll see more only exterior washes. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the percentage will decrease, okay, because we'll be able to wash more cars more quickly. So the number of exterior washes will go up. So I believe we're still going to wash the same amount of full service cars, but we're going to also wash more exterior cars, which thereby brings the percentage of exterior higher. Also, I'd like to make a clarification for the record. This is a trade definition, but there's full service, which is the interior cleaning, the vacuum, windows, wipe down. Then there's detailing. Okay, detailing is completely different. Detailing is done in that bay on the south side of the building. Okay, that's where it takes 30 minutes to 4 hours. Okay, that's a long process. So I just don't want to confuse our detailing space with the full service or interior cleaning spaces.
So the 6 full service spaces that are provided in your proposed plan, you've determined based on the new percentages you're anticipating of interior full service being done, you're certain those 6 are needed based on what you're projecting it will be in the future.
Exactly. I project our future demand will be the same as what it is now. Okay. And we know how long it takes to do an interior. So we're looking about 5 minutes, maybe as long as 6, because right now we're spraying we're fogging the interior with a sanitizer product. So Brian's shaking his head. So you apparently have had that done. So that adds 60 seconds to the process. So yeah, we've really got this down to kind of a science here.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer everything, Janelle?
Good, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Boyle.
You're muted, Mr. Boyle.
Can we unmute Mr. Boyle?
Is that better?
There you go, Brian. Please.
This is a comment that is maybe as much to go to the staff than it is to the applicant. The conversation has turned from the challenge with MDOT's property to what I think is troubling for us, which is the northern boundary on Brown. And it strikes me there's a number of issues. And I'm not saying I've got a solution, far from it. But this is really to Jana and maybe to others in the city. Why are we screening this activity using vegetation? We're in the heart of the city. This is an activity that is very much part of our urban life. We're using up valuable space with tree grates and irrigation systems and all sorts of things to grow trees alongside a car wash. There seems to be an inconsistency in this.
Robin, I love your question.
Across the street is a coffee shop, one of the best coffee shops, and I'll give them a call out. Birmingham Roast is great. Screen them sitting there with trees. We put a little fence, wrought iron fence between the Brown Street and people sitting having a cup of coffee. Are we tied, and this is to Jana, are we tied to having vegetation screening along that street, which seems to me inconsistent and troubling?
No, we are not tied to evergreen or green screening. In fact, the ordinance requires hard screening. Masonry screen wall or plantings can be approved by the planning board if they're durable and you can't see through them and they're evergreen all through the seasons, but they could have a 32-inch high mechanical screen wall to screen the parking. And then the issue of the mechanical equipment is that those vacuum pipes go overhead. So how high would the planning board want to see the screening? I guess that would be a question for you to consider. But yes, you could have masonry screening. And in fact, that's what's generally required.
And may I add on to that, Janet, real quick? You mentioned this earlier, and I'm sorry, I forgot to correct the record. We plan on putting all the piping underground. Okay, it's going to look so much better if we do it underground. Yes, there will be a stanchion that comes up. It's in the plans. It's like, what is it, 4 feet, Brian? Maybe 4.5 feet. That come 5 feet even to hang the vacuum on. But we're not going to have piping coming across. So those of you who have been to our other locations and you see our free vacuums where there's piping coming across the building, we did show ours coming across the building. We can bury that.
Mr. Boyle.
Follow up to Jana. In light of the quite common use of wrought iron fencing in our urban environment, is that possible?
Wrought iron fencing does not count as screening because it has to be solid for the first 32 inches of height. And it indicates it has to be, pardon me?
Is that because of the vehicular movements in that area?
It's because of the parking, yes.
Yes.
But on the other hand, if I can, bring a degree of common sense, one of the concerns with the sight lines onto Brown from cars exiting the vacuuming area, if it wasn't a solid wall,
They would have to get a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals if it was going to be a wrought iron fence, for instance. Somebody, in fact, who did that? I can't remember which parcel it was. It might have been the Balmoral, where they had a transformer on the backside, and they had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for wrought iron screening around that area because it was visible from the street, and they could not put a solid wall because DTE wouldn't be able to come and maintain it or something. So if they wanted to put a wrought iron fencing of some sort, they would need to get a variance. It doesn't meet the screening requirements. The engineering department's concern were with the tall trees to the west of the vacuuming area. Pardon me?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with them. I have a concern with these trees as well. Right on Woodward Avenue. I mean, geez. Close to Woodward Avenue. Okay, I think I've tried to make my point. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if I've caused problems, but I think we may need to think a little bit outside the box to keep this particular use in this particular site in the city of Birmingham.
Mr. Boyle, you routinely cause problems, but that's part of your charm. Are there other questions from the planning board for the applicant at this time? Seeing none, I have a couple quick ones. So at other Jack's Car Washes that I have visited, the vacuuming occurs first, and then the interior is done, and then you proceed inside into the building. I do understand this is a difficult site, and I'm going to give you that completely. But have you considered in any of every single different way we've looked at this, how an operation might occur where the vacuuming could occur first?
So, Scott, yes. In fact, the vacuuming first is the old way of doing it. It's the less efficient way of doing it. Any car wash that's built today does it all after. They do the entire interior cleaning service after, because it's more efficient and the customer can get out after the wash. Cars can be queued in order. That's another technical thing I didn't want to bore you guys with, but by keeping all the customers in their car before the car wash, going through the pay station, we're queuing the cars in order automatically. That's another factor of getting the cars through more quickly and keeping them from backing up onto Brown Street. So if you come in tomorrow, and see Greg, or I can meet you there next week even, you would see that we are actually doing what you suggest right now. We're vacuuming first, doing the rest of the interior first, then putting the customer back in the car. It's not ideal.
So I do understand that, and again, I don't know how to operate your business. You do, and so I'm respectful of that.
Thank you.
However, I hope you are respectful of the fact that some of us, many of us in the board, are being asked to put your business efficiency in our minds over pedestrian and vehicular safety. And so as you're sitting there thinking about your answers to these questions and our debates, I hope you understand that is really the debate that is occurring in some of our minds, is your business efficiency over good design and proper, safety of pedestrians in the public right of way and vehicles traveling from your site. So I say that I don't expect an answer necessarily, but I just want you to know that the concerns that some of us have are deeply rooted in something that perhaps we feel is more important than your business efficiency.
I absolutely respect that and hear you. And I'd like to reiterate that is another factor of doing it this way. I feel we are more safe by doing it this way. If you recall, our property now, the customers had to get out of their car and walk in front of other cars that were driving onto the line to get into our hallway. We're going to be able to eliminate that. I also see your point for sure about the pedestrians, which is why if we could do something to identify the sidewalk, I'm happy to do it.
My last question is really tied really into this issue of your property line, the inconsistencies, the ownership of Woodward. I guess I'm just curious, is there not a survey of the site? I mean, do you not have a legal description of your site? Do you not have title work that identifies whether or not you have encumbrances? Your title work would indicate whether MDOT has an encumbrance across property you own. Title work would indicate whether or not you have an easement. I guess I'm a little surprised that the owner and his representatives are not necessarily sure about ownership of the property and the adjacent rights of ways. So if we're going to proceed with this in the future, I would really hope you would provide us with the appropriate survey and legal descriptions of your own property to help prove your standing, frankly, in this manner.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll do what I'll do what I can. Again, it goes back a long way. Brian, I don't know if you have if you have that document.
Yes, I can send that email to whoever needs it.
Excellent, thank you.
Are there any other questions at this point from the board? Seeing none, I'm going to throw it over to the public for a moment. Is there anyone listening from the public who would wish to comment on the application? Excuse me. Again, doing so, please use the raise your hand feature at the bottom center of your screen. Looking right now, I am not seeing any hands going up. One last time, Jana, I don't know if you see anything I don't, but...
I do not. I don't see any hands.
Looks like no comments. Okay, thank you. So we will bring it back to the board for some discussion. Mr. Byland, Mr. Scobell, Mr. Lawson, please stick around. We may have other questions for you, but at this point, I think we'll bring it back. And Ms. Kroll, thank you. I know you are available, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. To the board for conversation. Does anyone want to start this off? Is that Mr. Williams, please?
Well, I think from my perspective, there are a number of unresolved issues. But I think my understanding of the reasons for improvements are clearer now than last time it was with us. So I think from the standpoint, as you suggest, of obtaining a survey and perhaps more extensive legal documentation from the applicant's standpoint with a more detailed response by Mr. Courier in response to their position and a fleshing out of MDOT's position we need, as Mr. Scher pointed out, before we can really take any action. I'm going to assume for these purposes that the city commission is not going to want to provide indemnification. So I noticed that in the proposed, one of the proposed resolutions. So I don't think I certainly don't want to be in a position of approving something that's subject to that issue. So we've got, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 issues to resolve. I do share the concerns that Mr. Boyle had about greenery, particularly on the north side. And I think the one thing that we should bear in mind is the comments from the applicant. The situation now is not perfect. Traffic backs up on Brown. I think this proposal or a variation of this will help get the traffic off of Brown. And I think that's a positive thing. I don't know if there are accidents, if there's an accident history. I think putting a stop sign up on eastbound Brown was a positive development. The city finally listened to me after 10 years complaining about it. But they finally put up a stop sign, and that slowed the traffic down heading east on Brown. But it's not perfect. But I think getting traffic off of Brown has to be an objective too. So I think there's a lot of work to do. From my perspective, I'd like to encourage the applicant to meet with the city, get the property description to the east, clarified, get MDOT's position tied down, and come back. That's where I am.
Other comments from the board? Mr. Kozak.
Yes, I'll comment. So, by the way, Mr. Boyle, that was the most romantic overview of a place that washes cars I've ever heard. So, I agree. Roast is some of the finest coffee in town, and I'd say Jack's Car Wash is the finest car wash in town. So, and I'm a member too. Yeah. But the fundamental thing. So we heard, there's very little that's been done since 1956. So things change, and improvements are necessary. But I still see this as everything I've ever learned about urban planning is you don't put parking in front of a building. So this is kind of like parking in front of a building, along with mechanical equipment and activity. So doors open, trunks open. Water spilling out onto the sidewalk. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I agree. I like creating an edge there, but this is sort of a suburban solution. And every time I've planted, more than 3 shrubs in a row, one always seems to die. And, I'm not confident, nothing against this applicant, but there are some landlords, building owners in town that do an incredible job and maintain it, and it's constantly beautiful. And there are many who don't and don't care because they're trying to run a business and they don't see the importance of it. I keep, I've never designed a car wash in my life, but I wonder, are there other options here? I'll just throw this out as an example. Do you build, in addition to the north, to the property line, and that becomes your new tunnel, and you take the existing building and that becomes the detail area. So you're making right-hand turn, you're not going against traffic. This pedestrian, I've walked this pedestrian stretch as well. And I mean, even as it's depicted here in the plan, it's, there's probably 10 feet of the building that kisses up against the sidewalk. The rest of it's driveway. We still have 2 curb cuts on Browns, or actually 3 curb cuts on Brown Street. I mean, this is not great urban planning. I understand the challenges, and this in many ways would make it prettier than it is today. But it still has some fundamental flaws. And, I'm just curious all those other options that your architect may have looked at. And is there something that's better than this that, makes a building that's more fitting of what our ordinance would require for a site like this? And it's not parking in front of a building, and it's not planting shrubs in front of a building. It's putting a building at the, it's a corner piece. It's maybe even possible that you'd be required to have like landmark features on your buildings, like your neighbor did across the street. So I'm reluctantly, concerned that this is not the best it can be. So it's my comments.
Mr. Meyer, we'll come back to you in a moment. I'll give you an opportunity. I want to let the board finish some conversation first. Board, are there any other comments or discussion that you'd like to have before I ask the applicant to provide any additional? I don't see many other hands. Mr. Mylan, if you're interested, is there anything else you'd like to offer?
Yeah, just real quick in response to Bert's question about us maintaining the landscaping. If you drive down Woodward to 11 Mile and look at our landscaping there, it's impeccable. It's the nicest property in Royal Oak. We would do the same in Birmingham, keeping it up. That's all I wanted to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comment.
I appreciate it. Any other conversation or comments at the board? Mr. Jeffries, no. I happen to share many of Mr. Kozik's concerns. I appreciate greatly that this is a long-time business trying to improve their site, and that it's a difficult site. It really is, particularly for this use, I think, more than anything. The added queuing off ground is a positive. I think it's important to state that. The added queuing is a benefit. I think it's also important to state that the applicant has attempted to improve the plan by providing additional screening we have asked for as a board, collectively at least. And they have made every effect to do that. I give them credit for that, and I thank you. There are some fundamental issues related to the property lines, the engineering comments, etc., the sidewalk widths. Frankly, I think those are things that could probably be overcome with some hard work on the part of the applicant and staff. However, as Mr. Kozik put it, there's just some fundamental things. As much as I am not going to say that I would not approve of the vacuums in front of the building, somewhat in line with Mr. Boyle's point, there could be some energy caused by that. Again, there just seems to be too many of them. And again, their orientation and the vehicular, the entrance, just the operation seems to just not work. And while I appreciate the obstacles there, I just cannot overlook the concerns I have about how this will operate, particularly related to, pedestrians. We're trying to create a pedestrian edge. Walkability is one of our hallmarks. We're working on a master plan now that invokes many of these concepts. And yet we're talking about allowing, 2 to 3 times the number of vehicles that are doing it now to drive over sidewalks consistently. And to somewhat obliterate the pedestrian space. So I'm very concerned. I think the movements out of the garage as it is right now do not work, out of the car wash, do not work in a manner that I think is beneficial to vehicular safety, though I hate using that generic term. And I wish the applicant could find another way to accomplish it, because I am supportive of trying to allow them to succeed here, but I just can't in good conscience, support a bad layout, and there's no other way to put it. And with that, I'm throwing it to other board members. Are there other comments? Is anyone interested in moving forward with the motion in any degree? Where do we stand? I'm not seeing any hands going up. Mr. Scher, as if reading my mind.
So it's obviously a difficult site. I'm very impressed with the applicant's willingness to try and make the situation better. With their willingness to be flexible. I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Williams that it's I think in these circumstances, it's premature to act. I don't know if at the end of the day, I will or won't be able to support the parts of the plan that call for driving across the sidewalk and counterflow. That it's that Woodward site that causes me the most trouble. I think the Brown Street issues can be resolved, and I guess I encourage both the applicant to sit down with staff and Mr. Courier and try and work through that. But I'm certainly prepared to suggest that we postpone this to give the applicant a chance to address some of the concerns, see if they can, and take it up at the meeting. I don't know if when the next meeting at which we would normally have site plans is, and whether there's a time available, but I think it's, I would look toward that, as a date certain.
Okay. Jana, while we're talking through this, what is the next 22nd is our next meeting?
Correct.
Is that agenda open, full?
It is open.
Okay, just for the record. Okay.
So I don't know, maybe we can ask the applicant if, how much time they think they need to reflect, modify, finish their research on property lines and who owns what. 2 weeks seems tight to me,
Yep.
Especially given the significance of both the chairman's comments and Mr. Kosek's comments.
I'll defer to Brad and Brian to answer that question and when you guys feel you're comfortable.
As far as the legal aspect goes, I can easily work within that time frame. This is going to, at least determining the actual boundary line is going to require a survey and researching title. That won't take me long. The issue that I may have, and this will depend a little bit on Mr. Courier's schedule, is obviously once I come up with this, and I assume he's going to take a better look at the memo and come up with something that either is for or against the research I found. But I would like to have a meeting with him to go over these issues. I would assume that sometime within the next 2 weeks, we should be able to do that. So at least from a legal standpoint, I don't find any problems having this done by the 22nd.
Brian?
By the Friday before the 22nd, whatever that is.
The 22nd would be a huge rush if we would need to get drawings in 2 weeks before the 22nd. Even, so it may take us a little bit of time at least.
So
what's the next meeting after the 22nd?
The next meeting is August the 12th, but that is taken up by the master plan discussion.
So it would be the 26th?
Correct.
Mr. Williams, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think 2 weeks is too close. And the reason is not just from the applicant's standpoint, but I think there are at least 2 or 3 departments or whatever from the city. We've got the city attorney, we've got the engineering department, and really then we've got their reliance on Fleece and Vandenbrink to review what's submitted in any revised sense. I don't see how that can possibly all work within 2 weeks. And to be fair, I think we had 3 documents dumped on them tonight.
Right.
And I don't think we want to do that again. So I'm not.
I prefer not to.
I appreciate that.
I'm not in favor of 2 weeks. I think it's too tight. I do entirely agree with Dan's comments, though, that perhaps a postponement is appropriate. Now, Jen, I guess the question is, because we like to flip dates, do we have something scheduled in late August at that meeting, the 26th or whatever it is, already on the agenda?
We do not. It's empty at this time.
So the question here is can we flip the master plan to the end of August as opposed to the beginning of August and come back on this topic in a month? I just throw it out. I don't really, there's no magic. I think 2 weeks is too short, but maybe 6 weeks isn't fair either.
Mr. Chairman, with regards to the master plan discussion, there has been extensive publication of that date.
Okay.
And I'm not saying we couldn't change it, but it's definitely been out there. The website for the project has been updated. There's been an e-newsletter about contact.
Never mind. I think under the circumstances, we almost have to go to the 26th then of August.
I appreciate your moxie, Mr. Williams, and trying to get this moving forward.
I do too.
Mr.
I don't know if it's appropriate to mention this at this time, but I'm going to give it a try. So if this is the layout it had to be, and someone could be convincing that it's safe and the only way it sort of functions, some of the things that I guess I would have some additional questions about. The curb cut, the current sort of entry on the site plan, the main sort of entrance, it doesn't seem defined. It says curb cut, but my measurement would suggest that it's 35 feet wide. So is that proposed to be improved? And I would think so. And if it's a one way, why is it 35 feet wide? Why wouldn't if there is a screen wall of some sort, why wouldn't it extend further into that area?
Yes.
I'm just going to keep marching around the side here. I don't love that. I don't even know how it happened. The brown, canopy thing that was sort of added on. I wouldn't call that architecture. We've all talked about tents and things like that on the board before. The new exit from the detail area measures 23 foot 9 inches. So if it's exit only, why is it 23 foot 9 inches? I'm just trying to do things to pinch down the curb cuts and provide more buffer landscape, safe zones for pedestrians. Why is there an escape lane? I suppose a car stalls or can't move or whatever, but how often does that happen? And, you push it out of the way or something. But because of this escape lane, there's another 10-foot curb cut with these sort of odd potted plants that to me look like a barricade, sort of like an afterthought. So those are just, and along Woodward, are there things that can be done to reinforce that edge, to give a pedestrian a sense of safety or some element? And, I've never been in favor of 32-inch screen walls. I always thought it's kind of an odd thing, but I can't even think of something around town that I think would be kind of appropriate as a, something that defines an edge. Maybe it's not a complete buffer, but those are things that, if somebody's going back to the drawing board a little bit, I hope they look beyond just, where's a property line, but what can you do to enhance this? And, I'd just be curious. Those are just my thoughts. If anybody else has anything to add, or am I off on some of those? So.
Ms. Boyce.
I may be mistaken, but I've gone back through previous minutes on this subject, and I think tonight may be our 5th time meeting about Jack's Car Wash. And my question really is, if we postpone and we send this to the end of August, how do we know that the applicant will come back with something that's acceptable? We've said the same thing for the past 5 meetings, and yet we keep getting back revised plans that aren't hardly revised. So I'm not opposed to seeing it in the end of August. I just feel like there's a very good chance we'll do this for the 6th time. So perhaps the architect might be able to speak about their plans for trying to achieve some of the concerns that we've had since the first time we saw this last July.
Well, Janelle, if I could respond first, we have addressed the concerns that came up. We looked at the MDOT issue. We came up with this determination on how it works by Bradley. We increased the screening because we didn't have nearly this amount of screening last time. So, excuse me, now we have it to where it's to city code, we believe. Obviously, there's some discrepancies that we can definitely work on. But if you go back to, I think it was 4 meetings, but if you go back to our first meeting, it looked very different than this. So we have come a long way in getting it to where you all want it.
All right. Any other comments from the board? Is anyone interested in some form of motion? Any other further discussion? I think we've talked this one through.
Mr. Jeffries has his hand up, Scott.
Pardon me, Mr. Jeffries, I apologize.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Janelle. I think we get back a little bit. I know they're trying and all, but I really think, coming from a previous life where I had an automotive background and the things where you sacrifice everything on the efficiency of a car going through an assembly line and stuff. And I think we really, this whole thing is prioritizing to the detriment of other concerns, efficiency. And I think there's a area in there that gives them much better efficiency than today, but maybe not the optimal efficiency that would be the panacea for them, but would give us a little bit more comfort that we've been, significantly improved safety and done it, and have a plan that kind of matches the city. I also agree with Bert. That brown vinyl thing when you enter is, we go around and on restaurants don't let them put up things that are 10 times more attractive than that. Mm-hmm. And my last comment will be, I kind of agree with the Robin that, we do a lot of stuff, and a lot of our ordinance is so that we can see activity, so that the city seems, things are happening and all. And we went through the downtown first floor stuff and said, okay, which businesses have activity inside? And we say, okay, well, these call centers don't, but a bank does. And I think, granted, watching somebody vacuum a car isn't super exciting, but it's activity. It's, it's commerce. It's kind of the lifeblood of a city. So I just want to throw those comments in. I would be in favor of giving them one more chance, I guess, to see something significant, that really kind of moves it, because I think this has just been, 1,000 little improvements, and I know they're trying, but, let's really, almost go all the way back to the drawing board and say, listen, let's take one more real hard look at this. And maybe it's only 5 vacuum stations, but guess what? We're not driving across the sidewalk twice with every car that needs a vacuum.
Thank you. So with that, is there anybody interested in Mr. Scher?
I would move to postpone the final site plan design review for 34745 Woodward Jack's Car Wash to August 26, 2020.
Support.
Motion, Mr. Scher, support by Mr. Williams. Is there any conversation at the board? Ms. Wibblevoss.
I just want to say tonight I am planning not to support the motion because I honestly believe the 6th time will not produce the sort of things we have been requesting since we first saw this plan. And to me, the 6th time in a year on this, I just think is inappropriate. We've been very clear since day one. We've gotten a few little things that we've looked for and asked for, but overall there's some really big challenges, and they have not been addressed.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments at the board level? Seeing none, I will take the motion to the public. Anyone in the public here to comment on the motion at hand? Looking now, I do not see any hands being raised. And we will bring it back to the board. Can we please call the roll?
Daniel Scher?
Yes.
Brian Williams?
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce?
No.
Robin Boyle?
Yes.
Scott Klein?
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries?
Yes.
Bert Kosek?
Yes.
Motion carries. Gentlemen, thank you for your time tonight. We will look forward to seeing you on the 26th, I believe. And please do try and take our comments to heart. I appreciate your time. Let us move along in the agenda to the next item, which is to the study session portion of our hybrid agenda tonight. Our beloved planning board action list. Jana, what do you got for us tonight?
Well, I have the updated, Yes, it's an updated action list. As you know, every year in March, we submit an annual report that includes the updated action list for all three boards. With the start of COVID-19, at the end of March there, it looks like we did not bring this back again for further discussion at the planning board. So the city commission had asked at the joint meeting if we could do that. So it is, or actually maybe it was the next meeting where they asked us that. But in any event, want you to take a look at the action list and provide your comments and input on the order of items, the prioritization or things that should be added, things that should be removed. Some of the comments made by the city commission were that maybe there were some older elements on here that have been on for so long, we should consider taking them off. I'm not sure how the board feels about that because repeatedly for the past several years, 10 or 15 years, we've been keeping the older items on just so we don't lose track of them, but they certainly haven't made it to the top of the priority list yet. I also wanted to point out that there have been a few additions to this, and that is number 5 and 6, the lot combination process and the economic stimulus options, and those were added for discussion purposes as a result of the joint meeting on June 15th, I believe it was. Just to let you know why I inserted them at number 5 and 6 was simply because I put them behind those items that were already in progress.
Fair enough.
That was my thinking. We can change it or move it, etc. So really, I'm just open for discussion and looking to get your comments. We would then take it back to the city commission and have them bless it, so to speak. But they did want you to weigh in and provide your comments.
So essentially, Janet, both the order of items on the list and to some degree whether or not we want to eliminate anything from the list, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Or add if there's something new.
Or add, as we're prone to do.
Yeah.
Mr. Jeffries, hand went up very fast. What's going on?
Well, I just wanted to, and it was in our minutes from last meeting, is this elevator on the roofs. The elevator lobby on the roofs. I think we need to take another look at that. I don't feel good about what we did on that. I understand our intent, but I think we may have gone a little bit too far on that. So I'd like to ask that we consider putting that on our list.
Okay.
Another one that, and I don't know how anybody feels it, but I'll throw it out, is this single family homes and stuff that we get involved in just because they end up in multifamily districts. I mean, it doesn't typically take us very long. We typically don't have a ton of conversation, but is that something that we have to do? Is it something that we could allow the building department to do their job, or zoning board of appeals, or
Well, right now, the way the zoning ordinance is written, it sends it to the planning board. Could you amend that section? Yes, you could. Of course, the issue is if it is a multifamily development, that generally that is something that the planning board would review, whether it's attached single family or multi-unit buildings, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm just talking more just the single family homes. I mean, like exactly what we did tonight. I'm just
right.
I mean, I almost wonder aloud, is the reason for us to look at that simply because R8 districts are traditionally, I suppose you could say, trying to encourage something other than single family. Maybe I'm stepping over the line with that, but and if we just allow anybody, are we going against what the master plan or the zoning would prefer? I don't know. Anybody else with anything new? Yes, Boyce.
I just have a couple questions about the list. The first one is item number 6, the economic stimulus options. When we talked about this at the joint meeting, we didn't have a whole lot to say. And I just wonder, is there some sort of more specific direction from the city commission how they want us to approach this? I feel like I don't know where we would begin or how we would tackle that. So I wonder maybe if Janet knows more, and if it's appropriate for our list now without any more further discussion with the city commission before we start that.
I don't have anything to add. I don't have any information or knowledge of any further direction. It was discussed at the joint meeting, and then when I brought the action list to the city commission, there wasn't a whole lot of detail provided. Essentially, though, in light of everything that's going on in the world and COVID and all of that, concern about economic recession coming, and how do we continue to make sure that Birmingham remains strong and viable. That's the extent of the parameters that I'm aware of.
Okay. Let me ask a couple others.
Little broad.
Okay, a little broad. I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with it, but I suppose if you guys bring us something more specific to start the conversation, we could probably do that. Number 16, the sustainable urbanism. I know we had a presentation from Nick a little while back that was really pretty great. If I remember, he brought some really interesting stuff to us to consider, and we gave our opinions on some of it. I hoped that we would see it back again. I'm disappointed to see it at 16, but then I'm also disappointed to see that it's recommended to be considered part of the master plan. I'm not suggesting that we have to cover every green thing in the world in one meeting, but perhaps it's an opportunity for us to take out individual issues that, as we did with, I think it was item 2, was it the one about solar panel review? Like, that's been plucked from the sustainable action item number 16. So, and glazing standards, you could even say, is part of that. So we've decided to pull a couple things out of there. Why not more, or why are we making it based on the recommendations of the master plan? I feel like we could do some work on that, and I feel like we could take smaller issues more one at a time and make them parts of study sessions, and not have to have them be multi-hour conversations. There are some small items that we could pull from there. So that was really, I didn't understand why it was part of the master plan, and I don't understand why we can't isolate some of the issues and address them sooner.
That's a good point. I mean, I'll take that to a next step and maybe even ask the board before I go to Mr. Kozak. I mean, there are several items on this issue: definition of retail, parking issues, encouraging housing options, that are at the fundamental heart of what the master plan is delving into in many cases. Do we need to have them on an action list, or are we, should this action list be the master plan, and then, as Ms. Boyce indicated, the 6 or 8 things that we know we can just do? Glazing, green building standards that are not really dependent at all upon the master plan. I throw that out just for discussion. Mr. Kozak, you had your hand up.
So there's a couple things. So glazing standards, that would have been done months and months and months ago. If it wasn't for me, didn't do their homework one day. I know staff did pretty extensive research into that. I said I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. I did. I probably forgot half of it again because it's very, very complicated, but I think I was probably talking to the same people, Jana, that you and your folks were talking, and probably had a meeting of the mind. So, that could come back and move that along. The other thing, this mixed use mandate for certain buildings, I'm not sure if that came from me, but I know it's complicated. It's expensive. The developer model might not work out. Where it's been done around town, sometimes it's, let's not look at Greenleaf Trust and think everybody can do that. So I'd be really, curious to have a conversation about it. That could be a master planning thing. And the other thing is, it's sort of come up a month ago, I think, with the All Seasons project and others. We have this lead thing that gives somebody a bonus to put a couple of floors on a building, and how does that benefit Birmingham? You might say it benefits the world because you've more environmental friendly and more energy efficient and whatnot, but our energy codes have become so stringent that you almost get there just because you're obligated to do it. But I know other communities allow you to pitch into a fund, if you will, that could, I'll use the Triangle District as an example. Would we rather have a LEED certified building, whatever that means, or would we rather have somebody contribute to a fund along with other developers and go build that park in the middle of the Triangle District? So, I think it'd be interesting to have a conversation about what other communities. I know Bethesda, for example, does that sort of thing, where I think everybody benefits and you see it, and it might be a stimulus for other things to happen. So, probably a complicated issue, but I think worthy of a conversation for a progressive community.
Comments? Mr. Williams?
Yeah, as to number 5, I think Janelle mentioned, I think at the last meeting or meeting before that, the background for the existing lot combination process. I too went back. I don't recall that we ever made a recommendation that was incorporated into the existing ordinance. So if we're going to study this, I would like Jana to provide some background to how the existing ordinance came about, because I just don't recall our discussion of it.
You did not. The planning board did not weigh in on it at all. It is not in the zoning ordinance, so it's not under the general authority of the planning board to make recommendations for changes in that ordinance. It's under, I believe it's called the subdivision ordinance. It is not under the zoning ordinance. So that's why you did not review that. That change came directly as a result of the direction of the city commission. They were very clear on what they wanted. We wrote up the language with exactly what they requested, and they ended up approving that change to the subdivision ordinance because that's what they asked for.
So I guess I have to say I don't understand what we're doing on that one.
So are they asking us to look at the subdivision ordinance again?
Well, that was the impression that I got out of the joint meeting. Not that there was any direction given, specific direction, because it is a workshop, but there were definitely several comments made that they wanted the planning board to weigh in on what factors should be discussed for impacting what way to decide on a combination.
My point, and I think buttressed by Janelle's point, it was discussed at a previous joint meeting, but I'm not sure it's within our jurisdiction to do it. So I'm not sure why it's on our list.
Maybe I could make a suggestion that this list is going to go back to the city commission. Perhaps with it, we could have a very respectful request that 5 and 6 seem to be important to the commission.
Right.
And while they were discussed at the joint meeting, there is a little bit of confusion as to the level and intent of what you want the planning board to do, highlighting the fact that 1 is an ordinance that's not the zoning ordinance, and 2, perhaps discussing whether we're talking about a COVID short-term environment, like the next 6 months with regard to economic activities, or whether we're talking about long-term, and they want us to actually look into measures themselves, or just the applicability of locations and the like, just to help provide us a little context.
Well, I think if I could just comment on number 6, I think the attorney who was there, obviously at the joint meeting has a background on it, and I think before we would start to study it, we would have to be educated to the extent we are educable on a whole plethora of issues. It's almost like Robin would have to teach us a course on background on this stuff before we could ever get into it. The legal ramifications of this are pretty significant, and I'm certainly not comfortable where we are right now based on our backgrounds that we can tackle this easily. I think the economic incentive, to the extent that there are provisions in state law, et cetera, that it's pretty extensive.
Well, I would agree with you, and I guess I would ask for clarification on our role, in land planning versus public policy, because a lot of these are public policy issues.
No question about it. Most of it is, frankly.
Does anybody feel that any of these can be removed from the list or should be removed from the list? I mean, I've got a bunch that I would say are fine with me to go, but I don't want to. I don't care if they stay either.
I was just thinking, you said earlier, Scott, that maybe we're looking at 2 lists, one of which are the things that we're going to address in the master plan, and the second list would be things that we could tackle right away. That seems to make a lot of sense to me, if we were to prioritize that way.
An A list and a B list.
Okay.
Something like that. I mean, because I feel like we could get a lot of little things done while we're still working on the master plan all along the way here. So that would make sense to me to do that.
Mr. Jeffries has his hand up.
Mr. Jeffries.
Yeah, I'd be remiss to myself if I didn't say this, but we have all these different issues, but the largest land planning issue we have in the city isn't on the list. Our Bates Street project, which is, based on a 40-year-old master plan, we've got all this other stuff. We said, well, let's throw that in the master plan. Maybe it's not a master plan thing this time because it's a little late, but how can you not have somebody working on this or whatnot? So anyway, just so it's on the record.
It's a fair comment, but our list here is not every planning initiative we want to do, right?
Well, if we only did one, that would be the one.
Sure.
So a couple things. First, I think of the divided list. We call it A list, B list, whatever you want to call it. I think of the stuff related to the master plan as kind of a separate checklist that we would keep somewhere, whether it's in the action plan or somewhere else, just to make sure the master plan does include all those things. And it makes no difference to me where we put it. I really don't care. To some of the other points, the issue of economic stimulus, that's really a municipal finance or governmental finance issue. If I were starting it, I'd start by talking to the people at the county who their economic development, they have a pretty broad understanding of what the world is. But again, I'm not sure how that's land planning, and others have made that point. And I think the short-term, long-term is relevant. One of the major items that the attorney cited in her memo, that law expires December 31st this year, requires the setting up of a district or an authority or something like that. So the likelihood of that being of any use is fairly low. And lastly, I like Bert's idea a lot of revisiting the whole question of what is it that entitles you to extra stories in the triangle or wherever else it is we want to give people bonus extra stories. I think we saw some of the limitations both procedurally and substantively of that problem or that issue.
Okay. So at the risk of trying to move us along tonight and the like, I'm going to have two suggestions. One, I'm going to be a rabble rouser and ask a question. While we are certainly in my mind right to ask the commission about these concerns related to economic stimulus options, perhaps we could take it upon ourselves, however, to look at it purely from a short-term current situation land planning. And one of our members I know has been quite keen on these sorts of things that communities around the country have been doing in response to COVID-19, which is land planning matters, closing streets, opening up outdoor cafes, doing things that perhaps we've not yet done as a city. Perhaps we could consider that those fall under this rather broad heading, which clearly do to me address land planning type matters. I don't know, Mr. Boyle, if you have any comments on that, but no. Yeah, Mr. Boyle.
Yeah, I do think there's relevance there. It seems to me that for the past 5 months or more, there's been a lot of discussion nationwide about the very relationship of cities and the way in which our economy will evolve in the coming probably 5 years, if not even longer. Strikes me this is a good time to have that conversation. And it may not be land planning in the traditional sense, but it's been part and parcel of the conversation for as long as we've had land use planning, which is basically 100 years. So I think to dismiss it would be a mistake. I think it needs to be contextualized. It needs to be understood. I think Mr. Scheer is right. It does come down to other levels of government, and of course, taxation and municipal funding is very much part of that. But it has implications for land use. It has implications for buildings. It has implications for how we use our space. So I would not dismiss it. I'd have it on the agenda, perhaps even make it more targeted, as the chairman has just said. I would be in favor of saying, what are the implications of COVID-19 for the city from a spatial economic perspective? That would be, I think, an appropriate way of having this built in to our action list. And if I can just pick up on Bert's comment, I think he's dead right. I do think that this mixed use issue is something that we're going to have to really look at. The real estate industry has struggled with this, and I think it's going to struggle even more. And we've got the opportunity to make sure that when we move forward through the master plan, that we don't just sort of blithely go on with the mixed use model as if it doesn't have implications for how our city functions and looks. It is something that we need to give some more thought to. So I'm in favor of having that remain on the agenda, maybe even give it a boost. So I'm in favor of both of these elements being there, if not being even more targeted in terms of what we do. And
excellent. Jana?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the economic stimulus options. The COVID issue is a temporary or short-term issue, but some of the, Mary Kacharik, the city attorney that was discussing some of those other options, I think those are a little bit of more a long-term type of options for economic stimulus to ensure that, whether it's we draw destination retailers or those types of things to keep our downtown healthy and active. So I do think there was definitely some more permanent ideas at play.
I don't disagree with that. I think we're suggesting that it's kind of multi-phased, if you will, multifaceted, and hits a couple of different angles. Without trying to crawl down the master plan rabbit hole, the idea of us discussing how we target new business attraction through economic incentives in the midst of a master plan being completed is a little silly to me, but the idea of how we strengthen current retail is certainly something that our current property owners and residents is certainly one that we could add to the list as more of a longer term portion of that same overarching goal. You know, at the risk of again trying to drive tonight and kind of move us along, let me make a suggestion. I would say that items 1 through 6 should stay on the list. I would say that item 7, which is long-term retail study, 8, parking issues, 9, encouraging housing options, 10, aging in place, 11, South Woodward Gateway, Mr. Williams' favorite, and 12, study potential D5 parcels, are all elements that are either not being looked at right now or are part and parcel of the final deliverable of a master plan and should just be put on that checklist, as Mr. Scheer says, to make sure that we got them covered.
Right.
But as an action list, they have no real place in what we're trying to do in the next 6 to 9 months. Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I would simply say, as to number 6, I'm comfortable with staying on the list as long as we maybe make a communication to the city commission that we're looking at this from the standpoint of land use.
Right. And I might even, to Mr. Boyle's point, suggest that it needs to move up on the list.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. And I think, I will say the one thing that I think everybody in business has learned is that the ramifications of COVID-19 are going to probably live way beyond the limits of COVID-19. Right. I think the city likely over the next 20 years is going to see less demand for office space.
Good.
Just like everybody else is.
Continuing along, 13, studying mixed-use requirements, which just discussed, should stay on and certainly gets bumped up the list. 14, considerable looking at definitions of principal uses for flexibility is inherently redundant to whatever the master plan is going to come. In fact, the master plan talks about changing our ordinance in that regard. So I think that puts on the action list or on the
checklist.
The checklist. 15, potential residential zoning changes, MF and MX garage doors. Sure. I suppose that could stay. It's pretty pointed. Sustainable urbanism. Sure. 17, additional items to be considered during the master plan. I think we all know that goes to a checklist. And then 18, if we want to keep the public review process for public projects on the list, just to remind us that is something a number of us are concerned about. I think it stays. And we've shortened the list and cleaned it up and acknowledged what we can do and what we think we need to wait on.
Okay.
Thoughts?
Nope. Sounds good.
Make sense?
I have a question.
Mr. Kozak, yeah.
Probably in regards to number 18. So the Architectural Review Committee, it's my understanding they've only been around for 10 years or 12 or 15 or something like that, not as long as the planning board. Why did the projects that fall under that sort of umbrella, why was there a separate committee created for that? Why not make it a planning board thing?
Well, the Architectural Review Committee was actually created to have a reviewing body for a project that does not go to any other committee for review.
So I guess my question is, why not, we deal with such broad issues and maybe we shouldn't be selecting the next park bench, on a street corner or something, but I know some of the things that they get involved in, I'm not sure who makes up the committee now. I know for a while I think they were short 2 people. I'm not sure if it's a big group, but so I've got that question, and then the other one is in regards to the gateway. That's really being studied in the master plan, right?
Right.
Just take it off the list. I mean, it's
yeah.
Does that make sense to everybody then?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it does.
We're in general agreement. Jana, you got good direction?
I do.
Excellent.
And where did 15 come from? Consider adding garage placement standards, door size.
I have a suspicion that
I have to tell you that I've been here for 18 or 19 years, and it's been on that entire time.
No, it has not.
Okay.
So do you want to leave it just out of? Do you want to leave it out of nostalgia, or can we get rid of it?
I don't. Doesn't matter to me.
Do you want that could be your thing?
No, I'm good.
Well,
So
none of us knows what it is. Dump it.
So is this in single family? Used to be 8 foot was a maximum width. They changed it to 9 feet. Is it that?
That was part of it at the time, and so I think to Janelle's point, we've taken that at one and divided it into broken it down into different sections, and we've dealt with the ones I think that we felt were the highest priority.
Okay, because typically what's different here is these. I don't know about the MF or MX district, but often for these types of buildings, it ends up in the back, not in the front, like you have on a single family residence. So.
The biggest issue was the size of garage doors and then garage front homes where the garage takes over the frontage and the design of the house. And I think we've addressed those.
Right.
It goes, Jana. Unless you want it on there. You want it on.
End it on.
A big X.
Right.
End it on.
Good. So moving along, any communications, administrative approvals?
Yes, we do have one request for administrative approval that we want to bring to you tonight for your consensus, I guess, as to whether or not it's something you want to come to the board. I do have Ryan Youngblood on the Zoom meeting to represent his client on this. Essentially, if you just bear with me for a minute, I'll share my screen. Okay, this is 600 Riverside Drive. It's part of a cluster development off of Southfield that backs up to the river. This is a homeowner here. This is the footprint of the house. They are proposing to make changes around that property. Now, we would, if it was just, say, a minor landscaping change, we would probably just administratively approve it. What they're doing is they're adding all of this landscaping, as I understand it. All of it is new, and they're also proposing this large deck in the back. The blue line that can everyone see it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The blue line is a retaining wall, which is already there because the property slopes down to the river. The red line is indicating a deck that they want to add, and it's a pretty substantial size deck. So it's a bit more of a design change than we would normally administratively approve. And then all this landscaping. I mean, I think the landscaping is nice, definitely, but it is a significant change to what's there. So we're bringing it to you to see what your thoughts are, and I am going to, if I can, it's not letting me. All right, well, we have, this is a picture of it from the back side, which would be the river side. If you were in the river looking over, this is what you'd see. The retaining wall's there. They have gone to the condominium association and they do have proof that the association has approved it, or whatever the body is. I'm not sure if it's an association. And then they also have a video here that they wanted us to share with you.
Wow.
What direction does the house face?
The rear of the house faces the river, which would be west. So I think
probably to the
east?
south.
Pardon me?
What's to the south of the house?
There's another house.
How close?
Well, let me go to the landscape architect because I don't know off the top of my head.
What's the address again, please?
600 Riverside.
Okay.
So does this border on the northern portion of the development, the subdivision?
Mr. Youngblood, are you able to answer that?
Absolutely. So for the record, my name is Ryan Youngblood. I'm with our Youngblood Company, and we are a landscape design build firm out of Rochester. The first question that you asked, Mr. Williams, was the direction of the front of the house, which faces east.
Okay.
The second question that you asked, or somebody asked, was how close is the south neighbor? And that's really what's stemming the whole start of this project, is that was a vacant lot. My homeowners bought their current home, and then to their surprise, the vacant lot sold and the house is extremely, extremely close and extremely large. If you were to visit the site, you would find that it's at a point of it being extremely uncomfortable from a privacy standpoint of being in my client's backyard, just from large windows, looking down onto the backyard space. And again, that's what's kind of really stemming the start of this project. And I think there's a third question, and I forget what that question was.
Are you I'm trying to understand where this parcel is. Is it also at the northwest portion of the subdivision?
It would be, exactly right, the northwest corner of the subdivision.
And what's immediately to the north?
It would, from my understanding, it's a private residence.
Is that an unbuildable wetland to the north?
It is. It is. There's a floodplain off of the river, and the lot to the north is unbuildable, from my understanding.
So the northern property is that large white Victorian house with one of the few actual brass railings around it.
I can't comment 100% on that, but I believe you may be correct on that.
Yeah, I think that one's 588 Southfield, I think.
It has a Southfield address, the property to the north, yes.
Yeah.
So does the proposed deck or any of the supports, are they within the floodplain? Are they within any, Janet, or do we have any buffers along the river per the ordinance? You know, a lot of communities have 25-foot minimum buffers for construction adjacent to a river.
We do not have it. There's nothing in the ordinance that would prohibit this deck, I guess, to answer your question, sort of.
The other thing comment that I'd like to make on if I can, on the deck. We've studied this project in several different directions as far as design goes, and we got approval from the association president and the association board. There is an association there, by the way, to do what we propose right now. We also studied along with them the idea of moving the wall, reconstructing the wall, getting engineers involved and all that. And we have found that this deck solves all the problems for my owner, and also solves several problems with floodplain, DEQ, and of course it's going to be the least impact on all neighboring properties from a construction standpoint. So the deck itself, obviously, you guys know, constructing a deck is far less intrusive of coming in and moving walls and getting engineers and DEQ and all that and stuff involved. So to answer the question that stemmed about as far as the floodplain goes, the deck right now is not currently designed to go into the floodplain, and therefore the wall stays as is, and we're cantilevering the deck over the current walls. From a site impact standpoint to the community, to the site itself, from an engineering standpoint, is we feel much less impactful.
You showed some supports coming from that. You're cantilevering that, or are you actually building, columns down into the? See there, you show some supports, and are you doing any excavation in the floodplain?
No, so that's all back away from the floodplain.
Okay.
So it extends just over the wall, and then doesn't necessarily truly cantilever, because you can see that you got your vertical supports right there.
Okay. Any concerns?
The neighboring property that was just recently built has done things very similar, if not more than this. And that was finished last year, so that's just something to kind of put onto record as well.
Does anybody have any concerns at a board level?
No. Nope. Nope.
Jeffries looks okay. I think we're looking fine, Jenna.
Okay.
In the room.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate your time this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jenna, draft agenda for the 22nd.
Well, you're not going to believe this, but we do not have anything on there at this time.
What?
Wow.
See ya. Goodbye.
Okay.
Hi, we should have a COVID party.
That's just astounding.
It is. There are several projects that are in the queue that are being definitely worked on, but they don't have complete applications in.
Wonderful. Well, in all seriousness, Board, we just talked about little things on an action list. Is there anything that we wanted to have a study session? Glazing or any of those other items that we've already talked about? Knowing that our next 2 study sessions are going to be dominated by the master plan review.
Yeah.
I vote for glazing.
Yeah. Straight done.
All right. So, Jana, why don't you take a look at 2 or 3 of those simple ones and don't load us up, but maybe we can start knocking off some of those that we've already looked at, frankly.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, I don't think we should pass.
Right.
And then, if I may, Nick had a few questions he wanted to run by you on some SLUP requirements, if everybody is willing.
Sure thing. Nick, what's up?
Sure. So this should be quick. I was approached recently about a restaurant moving into an existing tenant space in the O2 zoning district on North Old Woodward, that long commercial strip to cap the downtown. So, long story short, to be able to operate a food and drink establishment up there, for whatever reason, it requires a special land use permit. Yep. And I'm not talking a bistro, liquor license. I'm talking a normal food and drink establishment. The existing food and drink establishment, and whatever reasons were attached for that being there, and its legal non-conforming status, are all voided now. They had an insurance claim, took a year to fix, so any non-conformances are voided, so they have to meet the current ordinance. So my question really stems from, if we're gonna, for lack of a better word, make them apply for a special land use permit and go through that process. Full disclosure, I'm looking to make it a little more fair and a little more easy. A full disclosure, I won't hide it, because it's simply a new restaurant moving into a space. There will be no exterior changes, no site plan changes, almost nothing changed even on the inside. All she's doing is painting and touching up. So Article 7 states that the City Commission shall refer the site plan and the design to the Planning Board for SLUPs for its review and recommendation, and that each site plan submitted in accordance with that shall be on such forms and contain such information as the Planning Board shall determine necessary. And it goes on to list, site plan, photometric, the whole gamut. I was curious, just looking to explore all my options. What kind of things would you expect from someone like that? Keeping in mind that I'm asking because it's a simple, it's a simple tenant switch, and they're not making any changes. And we all know how, not that it's our job to think this way, but how expensive that can get for seemingly no reason, I guess. So I was wondering if I could garner any initial thoughts. I'm dipping my toes in right now, but.
Hey, Nick, I'm sorry. Where's the site at?
It was formerly a sushi restaurant at, I can't remember the address, darn it. It's in the North Old Woodward, that shopping center north of Lot 6.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
2 spaces up north of the Kohler building.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the last one was there like a hot minute.
Yep. And then unfortunately a car ran into the front of it. There had to be down for a year. Non-conformance rules are only 6 months.
Wow.
So, Jan and I discussed this at length, and for the entire time she's been here, she mentioned SLUPs have always been attached to some sort of site plan.
Yep.
Which isn't necessarily unreasonable. We could realistically get a site plan whipped up. But all the rest of the stuff, I'm not sure why we would need it. So just coming to ask, see what you thought, if you have any thoughts at this point.
And there's a big fee that goes along with it, right?
2,800. Yeah.
A lot of sushi.
There was a time to try to encourage somebody to help them open a business. We've allowed everybody to double their decks and all kinds of other things. Would be it.
I mean, do we
Does anybody have the authority to waive the fee?
Right.
No, the planning board does not have the authority to waive the fee. I guess, I think Nick's question more or less is, all right, if they provide photos, for instance, of the existing building and they're not making any changes to the outside elevations, is that enough? Obviously, we need a site plan because we've always tied it to a site plan. Do you want a photometric, or would you only require a photometric if you thought there was a problem with the lighting? Now, for instance, when Walgreens came in on Woodward, we knew there was an issue with lighting. So that's why we wanted them to provide all of their photometric, and they needed a special land use permit to add the drive-through on the back. So that was a good way to look at it. In this case, obviously, O2 is not meant to have food and drink establishments, but this one has been there for a long time. It was grandfathered in until the issue of property damage came up. But I still think you need to review the SLUP to a certain extent, because food and drink is not, establishment is not generally allowed in an O2. But I don't think there's any issues with regards to parking or lighting or any of those types of things on that site. So is there any way we could scale back some of the documents that you would like to see during your review? The fee, the planning board can't waive.
So, Jana, doesn't a special land use permit have to go before the city commission for their approval?
Absolutely.
So, despite what our best intentions and our heart may say, isn't this a question for the members of the city commission?
It is as well. And the city commission has waived fees in the past for not necessarily this exact situation, but other things.
I mean, I'm hard pressed to sit there and give you direction on the record to have them turn in crayons on a napkin. I mean, as we rail against half the, pardon me, junk that we sometimes do receive. I don't want to put anybody through the ringer, but I don't know that I would sit there and tell you that that's what they should do, knowing that it's got to go before the city commission and get their approval for a food and drink establishment where it's not allowed. I mean, I guess the best I can tell you would be that I'm certainly, if it's done well and done properly, I'm not going to nitpick like I might on other things. But I don't know how we can just, like I did tonight, I don't know how we can just summarily dismiss requirements of a SLUP, particularly when they're going to other boards.
Right. My suggestion would, I'm sorry, I was going to say, try something. Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like if there's missing information that doesn't allow us to understand things and make the right decisions, that's when we get tough. But again, if there's a photograph, here's a before and after, and there's no change, I'm fine with that. If there's an aerial photograph that shows, here's the site and there's no change, and
great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
That's good for me. Thanks, guys. Come get it.
Anything else before this body?
No more items from us.
All right. Seeing nothing else, good work, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good night.